So something a little different this hour that caught my attention and I think is worthy of some conversation here, and it involves a backup quarterback. This is RG3, Robert Griffin III. He's the backup for Lamar Jackson in the Ravens organization. Well, Robert Griffin III recently spoke in a podcast interview about his very public fall from greatness. He was on the fast track to being the face of the NFL with Washington, and then it all went to hell very quickly. So I don't know if you saw these comments or not. I thought they were interesting enough to talk about. I want to share them with you. So let me give you the truncated version of this. Griffin played the blame the media card from the bottom of the deck. Blame the media. He said that media coverage was part of the reason that he was seen as a failure in Washington. Now, he was traded up. The Redskins traded with the St. Louis Rams. I think it was like 11 or 12 players, something like that. They ended up giving up with draft picks that were then traded for other draft picks, and it ended up being a lot. It ended up being a lot. And so, but Griffin played for the Redskins from 2012 to 2016. He then did not play in 2017. And then eventually, obviously, he's joined the Ravens as Lamar Jackson's caddy right now. He also said, this is a quote from RG3. He says he's proven to the Ravens and hopefully the rest of the NFL that whatever happened in Washington wasn't a byproduct of me, meaning RG3, not working hard. Wasn't a byproduct of me, being RG3, not being a bad teammate or any of the negative things that were written. That was just a byproduct of an angry coach. That's just the bottom line. All right, so he's now added on coach and media. All right, let me walk you through this here. I'm going to talk to you like you're 5 years old. So the question is, the media and the Redskins coach, he's talking about Mike Shanahan, are those the reasons that Robert Griffin III did not work out with the Redskins? I'm going to do a little Maller math here. I'm going to go N plus O equals no. I'm going to go no on this. You've got Occam's razor, teacher's pet, and lobster. All right, so Occam's razor, teacher's pet, and lobster. Those three things, we will put them all together, and we're going to make a casserole is what we're going to make. It's going to be great. Boy, is it going to be good. All right, so to lead off with the media, and I love bashing the media as much as anyone, which is kind of odd because I work in the media, but the media did not get out on the field. Last I checked, I don't think any of those nasty things that were written or said about RG3 on radio or written on the internet, nobody actually played for him. He himself went out there and played like cow manure. That's how he played. Much of his time. They merely chronicled the very public demise of RG3, but hey, everyone has to have a fall guy. Chris Carter taught us that. It is much easier to point the finger. I'm pointing the finger right. I'm pointing at you. It's much easier to point the finger and blame someone else. And RG3, listen, the guy's a good quote. We talk about him a lot. He's a backup quarterback. He's living in cuckoo land. With a lot of these quotes, right? Good for business, for what we do. And I'm not saying the media was not an obstacle, but it was not the reason that he turned out to be a one-hit wonder in the NFL. The reason it didn't work out with him in Washington is very straightforward. This is a classical example of Occam's razor, right? The simplest answer, the very simple answer is correct most of the time, as opposed to the more convoluted bologna sandwich, which these things get twisted into. RG3 utterly sucked at a time you cannot suck. And he had some success, obviously, at the start. Things went downhill rapidly in Washington. He just wasn't good enough. And there are reasons for that. You can look in the mirror. Now, furthermore, you know that old phrase, you never get a second chance at a first impression. Job interview or going on a date. You know, we all hear that. Well, we all heard it. Mike Shanahan, this guy, he didn't have both feet in the RG3 camp. At first, RG3 referenced this. The mandate came from above his pay grade. Dan Snyder, and this was all on the public record, Dan Snyder became so smitten with the idea of this star from Baylor revolutionizing the NFL and leading the Redskins back to the promised land, that he moved mountains to bring in RG3, as we talked about with that massive trade with the Rams. He put all of his chips, just shoved them, just like right there, shoved them to the middle of the table and gave up all those draft picks and all that, which I don't have a problem with, because occasionally in life you got to risk it. You got to put everything out there, put your neck out on the line, and that's what the Redskins did. And sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. RG3 technically made a very good first impression. That is true on the field, but it elevated his status even more. And then you had the curse of high expectations. But it was also unbecoming, the relationship with Dan Snyder, and that's what he's referring to, RG3, that this was in the public square, that he had been given clout that he did not deserve. Right? There's a cadence to this. There's a pecking order, and he had cut in line, and that left a bad taste in people's mind. But the worst sin that RG3 committed as a Redskins quarterback, not only did he become the teacher's pet, not only did he win the Dan Snyder beauty pageant and become the toast of the town, but nobody likes the owner's back scratcher who doesn't win enough. The key part of that sentence, who doesn't win enough. If RG3 had been the same player he had been as a rookie and played at that level or similar, then there would have been harmony in the community. But instead, there was turbulence and there was disharmony. That's just the reality. All right, last thing here. So in his rookie year, I'm barely old enough to remember, the Washington Redskins put together a rather rudimentary offense. They circled around RG3, a hybrid version, as I recall, of what he had run at Baylor back many, many years ago at Baylor. And so at that time, it was just a year ago, and they reaped the benefits. They had a lot of success. He was galloping over, around, through defenders. He looked like Sonic the Hedgehog, RG3, running around, and he did not have to do a lot of the traditional dirty work that quarterbacks are required to do, meaning he was so good and he was so quick and so fast that teams couldn't figure him out, and he didn't have to go through the normal drop back, read a defense, look around, go through your progressions, find the open receiver, throw the ball where the defense isn't. And he didn't have to really hold on to the ball that long and make those kind of plays. And so what happened, like a game of musical chairs, at some point, the jig is up, the music stopped, and RG3 got hurt. And he was injured. It was a playoff game against Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. And at that point, he came back, and he was a meandering quarterback. And he made the sound a lobster makes. You know, when you hear a lobster when it's being boiled alive, that's the sound that RG3 made after the injury. It was a slow, painful death march watching him play quarterback. He was unable to adjust to having to be the drop-back quarterback that threw passes and didn't use his athleticism and his ability to run around and all that stuff. That was gone. He had to become a pocket quarterback, pocket passer, and he couldn't do it. And that's not the media's fault. That's not Mike Shanahan's fault. That's his fault. And you say, well, that's not fair because he got hurt and he didn't have to play like that. Okay, the other problem he had was the Redskins had this other guy named Kirk Cousins who got an opportunity to play. And in the same offense with the same receivers and the same running back and the same offensive line, he was much better. He was the superior player, head-to-head, face-to-face, belly-to-belly. He was just better. And so then that led to the reports which RG3 is upset about, of the pouting and the whining, and it became a house divided for the Redskins in the locker room. And there was a lot of stories around that time, which made for great sports radio. Man, I had some great monologues back in those days. Boy, it was good. So again, just to recap. All right, if you're late to the party, RG3 was not the victim of the short straw, and he didn't get hosed by anybody in Washington. His body broke down. He continued to get opportunities, but he had to change the way he played. He had to become a more traditional drop-back passer who had to read the defenses and do all that. He was unable to do it. And then Kirk Cousins played better than him, And so he no longer had a job. And it's like one thing leads to another, and then you're like, oh, crap, what happened? And that's the story, a cautionary tale for RG3.